Man, how about it? We're seeing yet another barn burner. What we've got here is a series of matches that were given proper time. This one's going to go 28 minutes and 8 seconds. The match we just saw went 30 minutes and 5 seconds. The other two matches were about 24 minutes and 28 minutes. Is there a sweet spot, you think, to a great quote unquote 5-star wrestling match, Tony? I mean, I know that we've seen awesome Goldberg moments that were 60 seconds, like a Mike Tyson match. And we've seen great Ric Flair hour-long classics. But it does feel like, hey, between 20 and 30 minutes is what all of these have been, and they've been fantastic. Do you think there's a sweet spot?
As far as time is concerned,
Yes.
time of match, yeah, I think the sweet spot is 30 minutes. And again, it's got to be 30 minutes with two guys or gals who can go 30 minutes. But if I mean what we have been seeing is these matches start out slow and then pick up the intensity, and you get right to the midpoint and someone starts to sell a lot, and then that person makes a comeback, and then the other person starts to come back, and for the last 5 to 7 minutes or so, it's going back and forth, and you don't know who's going to win. So I think 30 minutes is about the right thing to do. Uh, you can tell a lot of times if you watch a wrestling match. I know most of you know this. If two guys or gals have a lot of time, like let's say they got 45 minutes or 30 to 45 minutes or even 45 minutes to an hour, you can tell that they're going to go a long time when they do a lot of stalling on the outside at the beginning. Um, Even back in the Ric Flair days, when Ric Flair had a 60-minute match, they wouldn't go at it for 60 minutes, you know. Um, Rick was so good at being able to draw out a match. And, you know, we talk so much about greatest wrestlers of all time. And I know Brian Danielson comes into that conversation. Shawn Michaels comes in that conversation. Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair. But if you think about being able to lay out a match, Ric Flair was the master at that. And I say that because now in this era today, and me even back, I love that. God, I love that sledgehammer blow by Nigel. That puts Brian back on the mat and the turnbuckle and ties him up. Um, in today's wrestling, both wrestlers call the match, right? They both
Yeah.
know what they're going to do, but they also communicate with each other. Back in Ric Flair's day, one guy called the match, and that was Ric Flair. He called the entire match. He set up the whole thing, and he dictated the pace of the match. And that's why one of the reasons that you cannot say greatest wrestler of all time without having Flair in the conversation. It's not just because the matches were great, it's because he was so good at knowing how the crowd was, knowing where they came in the card, knowing what the matches were before him. He just was he was beyond anybody. I go back to I go back to the Great American Bash. I think we've probably seen it in the archives. Outdoors, Charlotte Coliseum. I'm sorry, Charlotte Stadium. This is before the pay-per-views, and Ricky's Ric Flair and Ricky Morton for the world title. And I remember being there that night, and the match started, the bell rang, and those two went at it. I mean, they from the time the bell rang to the first 5 to 10 minutes of the match, they just went at fast pace, a lot of fisticuffs, a lot of going back and forth. And I said something to Ricky Morton afterwards, and I said, Ricky, why you guys just started out I mean, it was like a crash. Why did you start out like that? And he says, that's why Ric Flair's the world champion. And I said, what do you mean? He said, because the match before us, even the two matches before us, were kind of slow paced. Flair knew that, and he wanted to kick it up a little bit. And so that's why Rick is one of the greatest of all time, because no one knew how to call a match like him. When Ric Flair was in a match, Ric Flair was in charge of the entire match. I don't know if you can say that. I'm sure you can about some guys back in the day, but I don't know.
It's interesting to see how wrestling just changes and evolves, and our taste do too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. I never thought I would like these stunt show matches that we see sometimes, and
Right.
not necessarily with us, but
Modern wrestling. Yeah.
modern wrestling. I never thought, but I'm enjoying it. I think that I've changed, and I think you change with the wrestling as far as an announcer is concerned. I mean, I don't know anything better than to sit down and enjoy a Boca burger and see Darby Allin jump off the top of a ladder onto plate glass. That's good stuff. Hello,
We lost Conrad again.
motherfucker. Okay.
You just got to stop. You just got to stop pushing his buttons.
If Boca Burger pushes buttons, boy, he's get back on here, you son of a bitch. Have a Boca Burger once in a while. They got cheese in them. Cheese in them. Hello?
You pineapple eating motherfucker, you
Yeah.
trying to get me to eat Boca burgers.
Hey, there's a question from Coach Rosie on here. It has to do with the NBA.
I know you
never,
don't give a damn about the NBA,
Really?
but what do you think about Anthony Edwards' rise to being one of the best players?
Former Georgia Bulldog. As a matter of fact, his only year with the Georgia Bulldogs, I was with the team that year. So I got to see every college game that Anthony Edwards played, and he was something special. We played in the Maui Classic against Dayton, and I don't know how many points he scored in that game. The Dogs lost in the Maui Classic to Dayton, but that we stayed in the ball game because of him. Because of him, he was an amazing player. So I'm glad to see that because he's a former Georgia Bulldog. There you go.
Coach Rosie also wants to know, my son Andrew turned 18 yesterday. What advice did you give your sons when they turned 18? And did you kick him out of the house right away?
I didn't kick them out of the house right away. I told all of them, you can live here as long as you want. This is your home. But they all eventually left and moved their own way. And my advice to my kids was very simple. And I even got it on the wall back here, right there. You can't really see it. But here's my advice to any young person. And it's pretty simple. Work hard and be nice to people. It's that simple. So